balance of my time to the ranking member, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Congressman Lynch. Mr. Comer, I just want to be pretty clear about two things, and one particularly something that you said. Let me just start by saying that you noted in your comments that your concern and your biggest concern was the issue of the transcript. And I want to just go back really quick because you and I share respect for subpoenas. Mm-hmm. You and I share that we want the former president to answer questions. Is that correct?
Correct.
Great. And so does every other member of this committee. We want the former president to answer questions of this committee, and we want not just the former president, but everyone to follow subpoenas of this committee. So let's agree on that. But to be clear, President Clinton, the former president, has submitted a signed declaration. He's offered to sit with you and me and answer questions. He's offered to have staff in the room to transcribe and be there while those questions are being answered. And his request was to do it in a dignified way. Your concern, as you brought up in your last comments, was that he was unwilling to do a recorded transcript. That's actually also not true. And to be clear, there's been public reporting, including in articles that came out over the weekend, that they have not ruled out a recorded transcript. I want to ask the president questions. Chairman Comer, I want to ask President Clinton questions. Don't you?
That's why we're here.
I want to ask President Clinton questions and a recorded transcript and with our members of our staff. Would you like to do that also?
May I make a comment on the transcript? They have not agreed to a transcript. Staff notes are not equivalent.
They've actually made public reporting.
So they're wanting me to make note. They said, okay, Comer can take notes, but they've called us all liars, and you know how the Clintons have gone on offense, and look, they don't get to make the rules. We make the rules.
Can I have the rest of my time back?
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you. I want to be clear, because this is an email actually that from the Clinton lawyers. You have this actually. To be clear, at no point were we opposed to the creation of a record of the interview, which is why we offered to allow the note takers previously. They go on. You have this email, sir. So I guess my question to you is, do you want to sit down and ask President Clinton questions? Actually, can I have my time back?
Well, the ranking member we'll recognize Garcia, then Mr. Donald will be next. So
thank you. So my question to you, Mr. Comer, again, is if we want to actually ask questions of President Clinton, of which those of us in the minority want to do, then let's get him in. Let's negotiate a recorded transcription of that interview to further our investigation. I thank you for the yield, Mr. Lynch.
Chair, time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Donalds.
Yeah, Chairman, point of clarification. Both President Clinton and Secretary Clinton were subpoenaed by this committee to come in for a transcribed interview. Is that correct?
For a deposition.
Excuse me, for a deposition. Chairman, I've been in these closed depositions a number of times in my time being on the Oversight Committee. I fail to see what President Clinton's talking about with respect to a dignified manner. Every time I've been involved in any of these conversations, even when it was former President Biden's son came in for one of those, and I'm not trying to bring up all the Hunter stuff. It's just a point I'm making. I think everybody just take the temperature down, relax. Even those the closed door depositions have always been held in a dignified manner. Members have had questions outside of questions from committee staff, but members on both sides of the aisle had an ability to answer those questions. Those interviews are recorded. The transcripts of those interviews are provided to the public. I fail to see what special accommodations President Clinton and Secretary Clinton were looking for. Chairman, can you help me understand this? Or even a ranking member. I'm really trying to understand. I'm not trying to make a point. We do too much of that here. I'm trying to understand, because if we're holding a new meeting to replace what the committee already requested, my question is why?
Mr. Garcia is willing to answer the question.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Donalds. I appreciate the question. Look, I think the committee first, I'm not here to defend the Clintons, to be clear. That's their job is to negotiate with the committee, and in this case, you have the majority. Their job is to negotiate with the majority on coming in for a binding subpoena, to be clear. But I'll also note that this committee has historically made accommodations for a variety of folks. In fact, I think it is a bit hypocritical that when this very subpoena for the Clintons were actually made, I believe there were an additional 5 to 6 other subpoenas that were issued to numerous other members of former administrations, attorney generals, and so forth. Every one of those other subpoenas, I think maybe with the exception of one, were given special accommodations. In fact, they were actually allowed to just send their responses in writing. Is that correct, Mr. Comer?
That is, may I respond to that?
Yes, in just 1 second. And so accommodations are made. And so while every other folks in that group were given special accommodations, that's been typically the case. And I'll finally say just this. Like you, I want to have President Clinton answer questions. I think they are trying to negotiate that with the majority, and they have been clear that it being transcribed is not an issue. they have not ruled that out. And so let's negotiate with the Clintons, and let's get them to answer our questions.
I mean, Chairman, since I guess we're on my time, and by the way, Ranking Member, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Chairman, you were mentioning you were going to inject your commentary with respect to special accommodations that have been made for previous witnesses. I don't know if you want to expound on what the Ranking Member said or not.
I would love to. So, first of all, you talk about ongoing negotiations. We have been negotiating for 5 months. This is clearly a stall tactic, hoping that the time clock runs out and the House flips and that you all let them off the hook. But secondly, you mentioned, and I mentioned this in my open statement, there were names on that initial list with the Summerlee motion and the Scott Perry amendment, Attorney General Holder, Lynch, Sessions, and Garland, as well as Comey. They all complied and had written statements under the penalty of perjury that they had no knowledge of anything with Epstein, that they weren't directly involved in the investigation and basically had no personal relationship. I think we would all agree the Clintons had a personal relationship with both Epstein and Maxwell. It's from the evidence that we've received thus far from the estate and all the other documents that we have thus far, it appears that Jeffrey Epstein visited the Clinton White House 17 times while he was president, and then post-presidency, it appears that Bill Clinton flew on Epstein's plane at least 27 times. So there's a huge difference between the knowledge and relationship with the Clintons and Epstein and Maxwell versus the former attorneys general. And another note, I don't know if it was Mr. Bell or whoever said that we only are interested in Democrats. We grilled Bill Barr and Alex Acosta, and they are very Republicans. In fact, they were members of the Trump cabinet. Now, I've been on the Oversight Committee 9 years. We've had 4 other committee chairs. We've had Jason, since I've been here, we've had Jason Chaffetz, Trey Gowdy, Elijah Cummings, and Carolyn Maloney. I don't ever remember a time, and I could be wrong. If I am, I'm sure you all will correct me, but I don't remember a time when Carolyn Maloney or Elijah Cummings subpoenaed a high-ranking Democrat to come in for a grilling. So to imply that this is partisan, that is just simply not true. We've already had 2 very high, the former Attorney General of the United States under Trump and the former Labor Secretary and U.S. Attorney. So we've done that. And then one other thing with the Clintons, and I'll yield back. One of the arguments the Clintons made, Mr. Garcia, was that our subpoenas were unlawful. Do you agree that the subpoenas we issued the Clintons are unlawful?
I believe that all of our subpoenas that we have issued have been lawful, sir.
Okay. Just any other members seek recognition?
Ms. Brown, sir.
Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's clear to me that the purpose of this meeting today is just to continue this committee's agenda of political theater, plain and simple. Democrats have been very clear abundantly, repeatedly, and without room for ambiguity. We want to hear from anyone who has information about the Epstein crimes. And yet, when former President Clinton and former Secretary Clinton offered to cooperate with this committee to submit sworn statements, to provide what they know, to engage in good faith, the majority said no. And that's what brings us to why we're really here today. The majority is rushing to hold in contempt two private citizens who have demonstrated their desire to cooperate with this committee and who have called for the release of every file on Jeffrey Epstein, all while the Department of Justice and Attorney General Pam Bondi are breaking the law in plain sight. Here are the facts. The DOJ was required by statute to release the Epstein files by December 19th, 2025. The deadline has passed by more than a month. And what have we received? 1%. 1% is not compliance. 1% is not transparency. 1% is a cover-up. What about the 1% they actually release? We've seen redactions that are extensive, unusual, and very likely illegal. And what's more, the Epstein Files Release Act, passed by supermajorities in this Congress and signed into law by this president, required the DOJ to send a report to Congress by January 3rd, 2026. More than 2 weeks later, what have we received from the DOJ? Nothing. So if my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were really serious about uncovering the truth and government and accountability, we would be demanding answers from the administration. We would be demanding answers from Attorney General Bondi. We would be demanding the release of the 99% of the Epstein files still sitting at the DOJ. So I have some very simple questions. Where is the subpoena for Attorney General Bondi? Where is the hearing on DOJ's failure to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act? Where is the accountability for the redactions page after page after page? This vote feels less like oversight and more like a distraction. A distraction from the DOJ's lawlessness, a distraction from a broken promise of transparency, a distraction from the embarrassment of a co-equal branch of government choosing complicity over accountability, and a distraction from survivors who deserve the truth. If this committee is serious, then we must hold the Department of Justice accountable. Release the files, all of them, and stop playing politics with justice. Survivors deserve better. And with that, I yield the balance of my time to the ranking member.
Thank you, Representative Brown. I just want to Chairman, I want to just respond to something that you said. I think it's important. First, I just want to